They rise out of jungles, deserts, and windswept plains like silent giants. Monoliths weighing hundreds of tons, stone circles aligned with stars. Pyramids are older than history itself. These are the ancient megaliths, mysterious structures that should not exist, at least not according to the story we've been told. Textbooks insist that civilization began around 5,000 years ago. They say humans were simple farmers before that, hunting, gathering, and surviving. Yet scattered across the earth are monuments so massive, so precise, that even modern engineers admit they would struggle to replicate them today. The contradiction is staggering. Imagine blocks of stone the size of houses, carved with uncanny precision, transported across miles of unforgiving terrain, and stacked into monuments that have endured for millennia. How could supposedly primitive societies have achieved such feats without wheels, without iron, without advanced mathematics? Mainstream archaeology says trial and error, ropes and manpower. But the stones themselves whisper a different story. Consider the alignments. Pyramids that mirror constellations. Temples that track solstices with laser-like precision. Circles that map the heavens. These weren't random piles of rock. They were observatories, calendars, and perhaps something even more, markers of knowledge so old it predates writing itself. If history begins only with written records, then what do we make of monuments built thousands of years earlier? Were they the works of forgotten cultures, societies erased by time, flood, or catastrophe? Or do they hint at something far stranger, an inheritance from an age the textbooks refuse to acknowledge? Mainstream scholars dismiss the anomalies as coincidence, clever superstition, or exaggerated myth. Yet the sheer scale, the perfection of cuts, and the global pattern of megaliths suggest intent far beyond chance. From the jungles of South America to the deserts of the Middle East, the stones repeat the same silent message. We were not the first. And if that is true, then the story of humanity is far older and far more mysterious than we dare to believe. But if these megaliths truly stand older than history itself, then who built them? And why has their story been buried? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on bell icon so you never miss mysteries told like this. Across the rolling hills of southeastern Turkey, buried beneath layers of soil and time, lies a site that has shattered everything we thought we knew about human history. It is called Göbekli Tepe. To the untrained eye, it might look like a collection of carved stones, massive T-shaped pillars arranged in circles. But archaeologists date it to around 11,000 years ago, thousands of years before Stonehenge, thousands of years before the pyramids of Egypt. In other words, it existed long before writing, agriculture, or so-called civilization. Here's the paradox. According to mainstream archaeology, humans at that time were simple hunter-gatherers, wandering in small groups, focused on survival. Yet Göbekli Tepe required advanced planning, architectural vision, and a social organization capable of gathering hundreds, if not thousands, of workers. The stones themselves weigh up to 20 tons each, some carved with intricate depictions of animals: lions, vultures, snakes, foxes. These are not crude carvings, they are masterpieces, evidence of both artistry and technology. Mainstream scholars say Göbekli Tepe was a ritual site, a place where scattered tribes gathered seasonally to worship, feast, and perhaps experiment with early forms of community building. But alternative researchers see something more. They ask, how could primitive people have achieved such precision? Why do the carvings depict a menagerie of animals that some claim could even map constellations in the night sky? Could it be that Göbekli Tepe is a relic, not of the beginning of civilization, but of its survival, an echo of knowledge carried forward from a forgotten age? What makes Göbekli Tepe even more mysterious is that it was deliberately buried. Around 8,000 years ago, its builders, or perhaps their descendants, covered it with tons of earth. Why? Was it an act of preservation, a way to safeguard knowledge through an approaching catastrophe? Or was it an attempt to hide something dangerous, something humanity was not meant to remember? The questions hang heavy over those stones, and mainstream archaeology offers no satisfying answers. From Turkey, we travel to Lebanon, where in the ancient city of Baalbek stands a platform so colossal that it borders on the impossible. Known as the Trilithon, it consists of 3 stones, each weighing around 800 tons, placed with such precision that not even a sheet of paper can fit between them. Nearby lies an even greater enigma, the so-called Stone of the Pregnant Woman, weighing an estimated 1,200 tons. Modern cranes struggle with weights of this magnitude. Yet someone, thousands of years ago, not only quarried these stones, but transported and positioned them with millimeter accuracy. Mainstream archaeologists argue that the Romans were responsible, building on the site around 2,000 years ago. But this explanation unravels quickly. The Roman blocks, impressive as they are, pale in comparison to the sheer size of the megaliths beneath them. Why would the Romans, with all their engineering skill, quarry stones so massive that even they could not move them? Why do the quarry marks suggest techniques beyond simple chisels and ropes? Alternative theories propose something far more radical, that the Baalbek platform was a foundation inherited by later civilizations, a platform built by a culture long forgotten, whose methods of quarrying and transportation remain a mystery. Could advanced technology, now lost to time, have been used, or perhaps knowledge of physics, resonance, and leverage that surpasses even our modern understanding? Whatever the truth, the stones of Baalbek stand as an immovable riddle, mocking our belief in linear progress. Then there are the fields of Karnak in France, where more than 3,000 standing stones stretch across the landscape in eerie rows. Dating back nearly 7,000 years, the Karnak stones defy easy explanation. Some alignments stretch for miles, with the megaliths decreasing in size as if marking a gradual procession. Mainstream scholars call them ritual sites, perhaps religious markers, or primitive attempts at calendars. But the precision of the alignments raises deeper questions. Many stones line up perfectly with astronomical events, solstices, equinoxes, and lunar cycles. Were they giant observatories, cosmic maps, or something even stranger, a message encoded in stone that we no longer know how to read? Even more baffling, some of the stones weigh up to 350 tons. Transporting them across marshy, uneven terrain would challenge us today, even with heavy machinery. Yet these primitive people, armed with nothing but ropes and wooden sledges, supposedly achieved the impossible. The mainstream explanation falls back on the idea of communal effort. Thousands of villagers working together for religious devotion. But this still leaves us with a haunting question. Why would early societies pour unimaginable effort into monuments that served no obvious survival purpose? The anomalies don't end there. Quarry marks that don't match the tools of the era. Stones cut so precisely they lock together like puzzle pieces without mortar. Transport routes that defy logic, requiring stones to be dragged uphill instead of following easier paths. Again and again, the evidence whispers of intent, of a knowledge that surpasses the accepted timeline. And when we look globally, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. From the Andes to Easter Island, from Egypt to Southeast Asia, ancient megaliths share common traits: impossible scale, precision, and astronomical alignment. How could cultures separated by oceans, supposedly isolated and primitive, converge on the same monumental obsession? Were they independently inspired, or were they all inheritors of a single lost tradition, a memory of an advanced civilization that spanned the globe before history began? Mainstream archaeology prefers caution. It labels the anomalies as coincidence, exaggeration, or the result of centuries of erosion. But alternative researchers point out that the very consistency of these anomalies is itself evidence. How many coincidences does it take before the word no longer applies? How many times can we dismiss precision, scale, and alignment before we admit there might be more to the story? Consider again Göbekli Tepe, a site that should not exist according to our textbooks. Consider Baalbek, stones larger than anything we can move today. Consider Karnak, thousands of megaliths arranged with cosmic intent. Together they form a chorus of stone, each site a voice echoing across millennia, telling us that human history is not what we think it is. And if these were not the works of farmers or tribes, but the fingerprints of a forgotten civilization, then what else have we missed? The question is as old as the stones themselves. How? How did people thousands of years ago move blocks weighing hundreds, even thousands of tons? How did they carve granite so hard that even modern steel struggles to cut it? How did they align entire monuments to the stars with an accuracy that rivals today's observatories? Mainstream archaeology offers an answer that sounds simple enough: manpower. Ropes, sledges, wooden rollers, and sheer determination. According to this view, vast numbers of workers dragged, pushed, and levered the stones inch by inch. The explanation is logical on the surface. After all, human ingenuity and perseverance can achieve remarkable feats. But when faced with the scale of the megaliths, cracks begin to appear. Imagine the 1,000-ton trilithon stones at Baalbek. Even if you assembled thousands of laborers, how would they synchronize their effort? How would they drag such stones uphill from the quarry? No experiment has ever successfully replicated moving blocks of that size with only ropes and wooden rollers. In fact, even modern cranes reach their limits long before 1,000 tons. The mainstream explanation begins to sound less like history and more like faith. Faith that ancient people did the impossible without tools we cannot even imagine. And then there are the stones themselves. Many megaliths, especially in Egypt and South America, display surfaces that look less carved and more machined. Smooth planes, uniform striations, and edges so sharp they resemble the precision of modern saws. In some cases, drill holes are visible, cylindrical cores that appear to have been extracted with rotary tools. But according to the timeline of history, these cultures had nothing more advanced than copper chisels and pounding stones. Copper cannot cut granite. Wooden sledges cannot explain perfectly circular drill marks. So what are we really looking at? Some researchers point to evidence of lost high-tech tools. Perhaps ancient builders had access to forms of machinery that left behind no trace, tools powered by forces we no longer understand. Others suggest sound, acoustic levitation. In myths across the world, from the Tibetan stories of monks moving stones with chants and trumpets, to South American legends of priests raising blocks through song, there are echoes of a forgotten science of vibration. Could it be that sound itself was once harnessed to defy gravity, to lift stones as if weightless? Magnetic anomalies at certain sites only deepen the puzzle. At Tiwanaku in Bolivia and at the Great Pyramid in Egypt, instruments have detected unusual magnetic fields. Are these coincidences, quirks of geology, or are they remnants of a deliberate design? Builders who understood the Earth's forces at a level we have barely begun to grasp. If so, then these structures were not just monuments, but machines, resonant devices interacting with the planet itself. Consider the precision of the granite boxes at Saqqara in Egypt, each one carved from a single block, weighing up to 70 tons, with surfaces polished to near perfection, corners squared to within fractions of a millimeter. These are not crude tombs, as some archaeologists suggest. They are artifacts of engineering so exact that even modern machines would struggle to replicate them. Were they storage containers for grain, for relics, or for energy? The question hangs unanswered, but the technology implied is staggering. Across the Atlantic in Peru, the walls of Sacsayhuamán rise with cyclopean majesty. Stones weighing hundreds often interlock like puzzle pieces, with no mortar between them. Their faces are so finely shaped that even after centuries of earthquakes, the walls have not collapsed. How was such precision achieved without iron tools, without advanced measurement systems? The mainstream answer is patience and trial and error carving. But look closely. The cuts are so exact, the fits so tight, that many believe some form of softening or melting technology was used. Could the builders have known techniques to alter the hardness of stone, reshaping it like clay before it hardened again? Even myths seem to hint at such forgotten knowledge. In the Andean legends, Viracocha, a mysterious godlike figure, is said to have commanded the stones to move at his will. In Sumerian myths, the Anunnaki are described as beings who descended from the sky, teaching humanity the secrets of building. In Polynesia, oral traditions speak of star people who raised the massive moai of Easter Island. Again and again, myths recall giants, gods, or visitors who possessed the power to lift mountains of stone. Are these stories merely symbolic, or fragmented memories of a time when technology we cannot fathom was real? Theories abound. Some suggest advanced machines powered by forgotten energy sources. Others propose the builders tapped into natural forces, magnetism, resonance, or even gravity itself. Still others argue that the technology was biological, not mechanical, beings with strength and abilities beyond ours, perhaps remembered as giants in myth. Each theory stretches the limits of what we think possible, yet each is born from anomalies the mainstream cannot fully explain. What is undeniable is that the builders had knowledge. Knowledge of stone, knowledge of alignment, knowledge of forces invisible to us. And if that knowledge was real, then it raises a chilling question. Where did it come from? Did early humans stumble upon secrets we later lost? Or were they the inheritors of a far older tradition, passed down from a civilization erased by catastrophe? The tension between mainstream views and alternative theories grows sharper with every discovery. Archaeologists insist that simple tools and massive labor are enough to explain the stones. Yet experiments consistently fail to replicate the feats of the ancients. At what point does skepticism become denial? At what point do the stones themselves force us to reconsider the boundaries of human history? Every monolith, every perfectly cut block, every unexplained anomaly is a clue. Together they form a picture that suggests humanity once wielded powers now lost. Powers that could raise cities of stone, carve mountains, and perhaps even reshape the earth itself. If so, then history as we know it is not a story of gradual progress, but of cycles, knowledge gained, lost, and buried in time. But if lost technology was once serial, then the next question is chilling. What kind of civilization wielded it? Long before historians wrote their chronicles, long before scribes etched the first tablets of clay, stories were already being told. Stories of a time before time. They echo across continents, whispered in the myths of gods, giants, and golden ages that ended in cataclysm. Modern scholars call them legends, symbolic tales invented to explain the unknown. But what if these myths are not fiction? What if they are fragments of memory? Distorted, yes, but rooted in real events that predate written history. Take the ancient Sumerians, often credited with the world's first civilization around 5,000 years ago. Their cuneiform tablets tell of beings called the Anunnaki, those who came from the heavens to shape humanity. According to the myths, the Anunnaki imparted knowledge, teaching agriculture, architecture, and astronomy. To a modern ear, it sounds fantastical. Yet consider this. Why would the very first civilization, barely emerging from prehistory, already carry tales of advanced beings descending from the sky? Could this be a memory, passed down from even earlier, of a race or a people whose wisdom shaped the world before the flood? The Greeks, too, preserved a haunting tale through the voice of Plato. In his dialogues, Plato recounts the history of Atlantis, a great island civilization blessed with technology, wealth, and knowledge. But it grew arrogant, and in a single night and day of misfortune, it was swallowed by the sea. For centuries, Atlantis has been dismissed as allegory, yet the details in Plato's account are strangely specific. The layout of the city, its concentric rings, its maritime power. Could Plato have been preserving a memory, one passed to him from Egyptian priests, of a real civilization, destroyed by rising seas at the end of the Ice Age? Across the ocean, the Andean people told of Viracocha, a mysterious godlike figure who appeared after a great flood. He was said to have taught humanity how to rebuild, how to farm, how to build, how to live again. Legends describe him as a tall figure, often with a beard, unlike the native people of the Andes. Wherever he went, stone monuments rose. The echoes of this myth sound uncannily similar to others. A civilizer, arriving after destruction, passing on knowledge as though it were the remnants of a vanished world. In India, the Vedic texts speak of world ages, yugas that rise and fall in great cycles. They describe advanced societies, flying machines called vimanas, and cosmic wars fought with weapons of unimaginable power. At the end of each age comes destruction, fire, flood, or cosmic upheaval, before the cycle begins anew. Are these poetic metaphors, or a memory of civilizations lost to catastrophes now buried in geological time? Even beneath the waves, evidence seems to support the myths. Off the coast of Japan lies Yonaguni, a submerged structure resembling step pyramids and terraces carved into the seafloor. Debate rages over whether it is natural or man-made. Yet its angles, stairways, and geometric forms are difficult to dismiss as mere coincidence. If Yonaguni is a ruin, then it sank beneath the ocean more than 10,000 years ago, at the very end of the last ice age. In India's Gulf of Kambat, sonar surveys have revealed submerged cities stretching for miles. Divers have brought up artifacts, pottery, tools, even possible structures that date back over 9,000 years. Local legends speak of Dwarka, the city of Lord Krishna, swallowed by the sea in ancient times. Once again, myth and archaeology converge. Was Dwarka a real place, drowned as seas rose after the melting of the great glaciers? If so, it means organized civilization existed thousands of years earlier than we admit. And the flood myths, they are everywhere. From Mesopotamia's story of Utnapishtim, to the biblical Noah, to the Aztec tales of the 5 sons, cultures across the world remember a great deluge. Mainstream scholars say floods are a universal metaphor for renewal, but geology tells another story. Around 12,000 years ago, at the end of the Pleistocene, sea levels rose dramatically as ice sheets melted. Entire coastlines vanished, Could these myths be cultural memories of real events, of cities, monuments, and civilizations swallowed by rising waters? The global pattern of megaliths only deepens the puzzle. How is it that cultures separated by oceans all built with stone on a massive scale? Why do myths from Peru resemble myths from Mesopotamia or India or Polynesia? Did humanity simply arrive at the same ideas independently? Or is there a missing chapter, a shared inheritance from a civilization older than history itself? Alternative researchers argue that these similarities are too strong to ignore. The myths describe advanced beings. Thereins suggest advanced knowledge. The floods caused the catastrophe. Taken together, they paint a picture. A great civilization once spanned the globe. A civilization destroyed but dimly remembered in stories. Mainstream archaeology calls this fantasy, insisting no evidence supports such a claim. Yet the evidence is there. Submerged ruins, impossible megaliths, oral traditions preserved with striking consistency. The refusal to connect these dots may say more about our own biases than about the truth of the past. Consider again Plato's Atlantis. He wrote that it was destroyed around 9600 BCE, the exact period when the Ice Age ended, when seas rose, and when many megaliths seemed to appear. He claimed this story was passed down through Egyptian priests, who themselves preserved ancient records. Could Atlantis, in some form, be the cultural memory of a real global collapse? Could the myths of Viracocha, the Anunnaki, and the Vedic ages be other fragments of the same forgotten story? Myths are often dismissed as fantasy. But myths, unlike fairy tales, endure for millennia. They are not easily erased. They carry patterns, archetypes, and sometimes details so precise they beg to be reconsidered. What if those details are not imagination, but memory? Memory of an age when humans, or perhaps beings beyond human, built in stone, mapped the stars, and then vanished beneath flood and fire. The deeper we look, the harder it becomes to believe that all of this is coincidence. Submerged ruins, flood myths, civilizing gods, megaliths echoing each other across continents. Together, they suggest a forgotten age, one erased not by conquest or decay, but by cataclysm. And if that is true, then history as we know it is only a fragment, a shadow of a story far older, far stranger, and far more tragic than we have been allowed to remember. And if all these myths converge on a single event, the fall of a great civilization, then what catastrophic force erased it from memory? History, we are told, is a discipline of evidence. It is supposed to move with the discoveries unearthed in the dirt, the bones, the stones, and the fragments of civilizations long gone. Yet when it comes to the deepest and most unsettling, anomalies, the kind that suggest advanced civilizations before recorded, time, the discipline of archaeology seems to shift from a science of discovery to a science of control. Again and again, discoveries that should have forced a rewrite of the past are instead brushed aside, dismissed, or buried under the weight of academic orthodoxy. And the question is, why? The official position is simple enough. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. A stone out of place, a legend of a lost city, or a radiocarbon date that doesn't fit the accepted model, all can be explained away as error, coincidence, or misinterpretation. This sounds reasonable, even scientific, but look closer and a darker pattern begins to emerge. The most extraordinary evidence does exist. It just never makes it to the textbooks. Take the stories of archaeologists who dared to question the timeline. Their careers often end not in acclaim, but in quiet exile. Papers are rejected before peer review, grants vanish, university positions evaporate. The message to young researchers is unmistakable. Do not rock the foundations. One scholar who presented evidence that humans were in the Americas far earlier than Clovis culture found his reputation shredded and his funding cut. Decades later, the evidence was quietly confirmed by new finds. But by then, his name was a cautionary tale. Science moves forward, yes, but only after the guardians of orthodoxy have retired or died. Then there are the stories whispered by museum curators, rooms of artifacts that never see the light of day, items catalogued, stored, and effectively forgotten. Giant bones allegedly dug up in the 19th century, strange tools found in geological layers far older than humans are supposed to exist. Carved stones retrieved from depths of mines that should predate any known culture. Are all these stories hoaxes? Perhaps. But the sheer volume of them raises another possibility. Inconvenient evidence is not always destroyed. It is simply hidden away, stripped of its context, left to gather dust until no one remembers its significance. Politics, too, plays its part. Archaeology is not just an academic pursuit. It is tied to nations, funding agencies, and cultural narratives. Admitting that ancient sites may have been built by a civilization older and more advanced than we allow threatens more than textbooks. It threatens national pride, religious traditions, and political agendas. Consider Egypt. Its tourism industry rests on the official timeline of the pyramids. To suggest they might be far older, built by an unknown culture before dynastic Egypt, is to undermine a national identity built around being the heirs of the pyramid builders. It is easier to deny, to ridicule, or to ignore dissenting voices than to grapple with the implications. Even deeper than politics is psychology. The accepted story of history is comforting. Civilization began around 6,000 years ago, grew steadily, and reached its pinnacle in Yas. To suggest that there may have been civilizations more advanced than we allow, civilizations wiped from memory by catastrophe, forces us to confront an uncomfortable possibility. That progress is not guaranteed, that humanity may rise, fall, and rise again, and that we ourselves may not be the first iteration of intelligent builders on this earth. This is not just academic controversy, it is existential dread, and so the human mind resists. But suppression does not erase the evidence. Time and again, the stones themselves refuse silence. Quarry marks that cannot be made with stone hammers. Drill holes spiraled into granite long before steel was supposedly invented. Megaliths aligned with celestial bodies in ways that rival modern observatories. These are not theories or myths. They are measurable facts. And yet, textbooks glance past them, choosing the safety of familiar explanations over the danger of rewriting the narrative. Some argue this is not a conspiracy at all, but simply inertia. Institutions are built to defend themselves. Paradigms shift only under great pressure, and anomalies, no matter how compelling, are treated as cracks to be plastered over, rather than reasons to rebuild the house. In this view, the cover-up of deep time is not orchestrated, but systemic. It is the sum of 1,000 small acts of dismissal, ridicule, and career destruction that together enforce silence. Yet to those standing outside the walls of academia, watching discovery after discovery buried under skepticism, it begins to look very much like deliberate concealment. The more the evidence mounts, the more determined the gatekeepers seem to become. And this raises an even deeper question. What are they really afraid of? Is it that the evidence does not fit? Or is it that it fits too well, that it confirms myths of a lost civilization, a forgotten age of builders who command tools and knowledge we cannot even replicate today? If so, then the cover-up is not simply about protecting careers or funding. It is about protecting the narrative of human uniqueness, of progress as a straight line, of history as we have been taught. Imagine the world if tomorrow it were admitted that civilizations older than history once walked the earth. Religions would shudder, nations would scramble to claim descent, science would be forced to ask whether we are truly the first or simply the latest in a cycle of rise and fall. The stakes are enormous, and the silence begins to make a grim kind of sense. And yet, silence cannot last forever. Every year, more evidence surfaces that refuses to be explained away. Submerged ruins revealed by sonar, stones cut with impossible precision. Oral traditions, once dismissed as myths, align with geological and archaeological findings. The story of human origins is no longer a straight line. It is a puzzle with missing pieces, pieces that keep surfacing in inconvenient places. The cover-up of deep time may not be an active conspiracy in smoky backrooms. It may be something more insidious, the human instinct to protect certainty, to cling to a story that makes sense, to defend the boundaries of what we know against the vastness of what we do not. But the stones remain, immovable, undeniable, and with each passing decade, they grow louder, as if daring us to listen. The real danger is not that the truth will remain hidden. It is that we may be too afraid to face it when it finally breaks free. Because if the monuments are telling the truth, if the myths are more than stories, if the evidence is more than an anomaly, then we are not the first civilization, not the only advanced builders, and not the sole authors of Earth's history. We are merely the latest chapter in a book that stretches far deeper into time than we dare imagine. And so we return to the haunting question: why the silence? Why the suppression? Perhaps because the truth is too vast, too destabilizing, too dangerous to be written into the fragile story we call history. But stones do not lie, and myths do not survive for millennia without cause. The evidence may be buried, the scholars silenced, the anomalies dismissed, but the earth itself remembers. And if the guardians of history refuse to acknowledge the truth, then perhaps it is not their silence we should fear, but the voice that will one day rise from the stones themselves. But if the truth is too dangerous for history, books, what happens when the stones themselves begin to speak louder than the silence? The journey through the megaliths of the ancient world has led us into a labyrinth of contradictions. We are told that 12,000 years ago, humanity consisted of small bands of hunters and gatherers, scattered, primitive, and just beginning to experiment with farming. And yet, standing in silent defiance of that story are monuments that should not exist. Göbekli Tepe, older than agriculture, designed with sophistication and intent. The Baalbek stones, each weighing more than 1,000 tons, moved and placed as if gravity were optional. The endless alignments of Karnak, standing in their thousands, as though marking the pulse of the earth itself. If the accepted timeline is correct, then these sites are impossible, and yet they are there. Cut into the landscape, carved in stone, they demand an explanation that has never been comfortably given. Mainstream archaeology proposes ritual sites, communal projects, or trial engineering, but none of these are truly satisfying. None explain the precision, the scale, the enduring purpose that echoes across millennia. In searching for answers, we are forced to consider possibilities that stretch beyond the safety of textbooks. Could there have been knowledge of stone, of stars, of forces we have forgotten, that belong not to us, but to a people before us, a civilization whose memory lingers not in written records, but in stone, in myth, and in the whispering traditions of cultures spread across the globe? The technology question lingers like an unanswered riddle. Copper chisels and ropes cannot explain machining marks, core drill holes, and surfaces polished as if by tools we would recognize in our own modern workshops. The stones do not lie. Their scars are not accidents of nature. They tell of hands that worked with confidence, with understanding, with methods no primitive tribe should have possessed. Were these techniques once commonplace, lost to catastrophe, and only remembered as tales of gods, giants, and star people? If so, then our myths may be less fiction than memory. The stories of the first civilization run through cultures as if carried by some hidden river of remembrance. Sumerian tales of the Anunnaki, Plato's warning of Atlantis, the Andean god Viracocha, and India's Vedic ages, different names, different languages, but always the same pattern. A golden age that ended in fire and flood, a knowledge so vast it seemed divine, cut short by catastrophe, and preserved only as fragments. These myths do not explain each other away. Instead, they weave into a single fabric, pointing to the same possibility, that humanity has lived through cycles, each time rising, each time falling, each time leaving behind whispers for the future. And if this is true, then what we call prehistory may not be empty space at all, but a vast ocean of forgotten chapters. Civilizations that rose higher than we imagine, only to vanish, leaving behind monuments too massive to erase. Stone does not burn, stone does not rot, and so it remains, standing against the tide of time, waiting for us to listen. The controversy that surrounds these mysteries reveals as much about us as it does about the past. Our reluctance to accept what does not fit, our resistance to rewriting the story, may be the greatest cover-up of all. Perhaps no conspiracy is required. Perhaps silence is simply easier than truth. But silence cannot hold forever. The stones are louder than our textbooks. They testify to something greater, something older, something we are only beginning to grasp. So where does this leave us? With contradictions, yes, but also with a sense of awe. If the megaliths are relics of a forgotten age, then history is not a straight line. It is a circle, a cycle, a rhythm of creation and collapse. Civilizations may not march inevitably toward progress. They may climb, fall, and climb again, each time rediscovering truths buried in the rubble of the last. This thought is both humbling and chilling. It means that our own civilization is not unique. We may not be the pinnacle, but merely the latest attempt. The megaliths stand as silent warnings as much as wonders. They remind us that greatness has come before and been lost. They suggest that our achievements too may one day be dust, leaving behind only ruins for some future people to puzzle over. The question then is not only who built the megaliths, or how, or why. It is what they mean for us. If others before us mastered stone, measured the stars, and walked a path of knowledge, only to be erased by catastrophe, then what guarantee do we have that our story will end differently? The cycle may yet repeat, and our skyscrapers and satellites may become tomorrow's forgotten myths. Perhaps this is the true power of the megaliths, not simply that they are impossible monuments, but that they are messages across time. They whisper that history is deeper than we know, that humanity is older than we admit, and that the line between myth and memory is thinner than we believe. They stand not only as mysteries to solve, but as warnings to heed. The stones do not answer. They do not explain. They endure. And in their silence lies the most haunting truth of all, that we are not the first, and we may not be the last. Maybe the greatest secret isn't who built the megaliths, but whether we too are destined to be forgotten.